Hello and welcome. I'm Amritanshu Rai and you're watching Law of the Land on Raj Sabha TV. Today we bring to you the Defence Procurement Procedure 2011. This is the policy document which guides the entire defence procurement and process. To discuss the issue, I have with me Mr. Jayant Patil, Executive Vice President, Heavy Engineering Board, L&T, and Commodore Rabjit B. Rai, Vice President, Indian Maritime Foundation. Now for the headlines. The Defence Procurement Procedure 2011 is aimed at simplifying procedures, speeding up procurement and enhancing benefits for the Indian defence industry. New guidelines for shipbuilding by private shipyards on competitive basis have also been included. Defence Procurement Procedure 2011 policy lays down two sets of guidelines for domestic shipbuilding public sector units to get orders under special category. The Defence Procurement Procedure 2011 is aimed at simplifying procedures, speeding up procurement and enhancing benefits for the Indian defence industry. New guidelines for shipbuilding by private shipyards on competitive basis have also been included. The policy seeks to bring in larger involvement of private sector.
India is the 10th largest arms importer in the world. With its fledgling defence industrial base, India imports almost 70% of its military hardware and software from outside. According to a Stockholm-based International Peace Research Institute SIPRI report, India accounted for 10% of global arms imports between 2007 and 2011. To decrease its dependency on foreign markets and enhance defence industrial base, DIB, the Defence Procurement Procedure 2011, brings in changes to its procurement policy.
100% of the defence sector was reserved only for the public sector. But over the years, we are changing that. Now the present policy is 100% private participation is allowed. For private companies, it is about 74. It is about 74. The 100%.
An industrial base would be built up in India. Jobs will get created. Economic activity will take place, and we will move towards our objective of greater self-reliance in defence equipment.
Defence Procurement Procedure 2011 will cover all capital acquisitions undertaken by the Ministry of Defence, Defence Services and Indian Coast Guard, both from indigenous sources and foreign sources. Capital acquisition will include buy and make provision. This planning process will cover the long-term 15 years, medium-term 5 years and short-term annual acquisition plans. Buy would mean outright purchase of equipment. By category is further divided into Buy Indian and Buy Global. Buy Indian will mean purchase from Indian vendor, while Buy Global will be applicable to foreign as well as Indian vendors. There must be a minimum of 30% indigenous content if the systems are being provided by an Indian vendor under Buy Global category. Buy and make decision would mean both purchase from a vendor followed by indigenous manufacturer in the country. Buy and make Indian must have minimum 50% indigenous content on cost basis.
Previously, we used to normally bank upon the buy and make policies where you say, I'm going to buy X amount of equipment from the foreign buyers. Then after it will be made with the transfer of technology, and that transfer of technology was normally to a public sector undertaking. Private players are not interjected into that. Today, by doing that, we will have a buy and make policy wherein it could be buy and make global, where the Indian players also equally come.
The new policy pledges to simplify the make category of the DPP, which makes Indian companies or consortiums compete against each other to develop complex defense systems. So far, the make category has seen just one project launched to indigenously build a future infantry combat vehicle FICV for the army. A second make project to build a tactical communication system is now on the anvil. Acquisitions covered under the make decisions would include high technology complex systems to be designed, developed and produced indigenously.
Does the DPP actually simplify procurement procedure and speed up procurement? My first question to you is, Mr. Patil. See, you've seen the story that we've put out. actually brings in almost everything, the various categories. But there's one thing unique, that is every category, the Indian private industry has been given an opening. Do you think the Indian industry is ready to take advantage of that?
Before I go on to the advantage which Indian industry can take, to my mind, the policy, all of us can possibly agree that is genuinely opening up. The issue is the implementation of that policy. Where we really see a gap in the private sector is the implementation in terms of actually allowing private sector to enter. The process today takes typically 4 to 5 years from the date a change in policy is initiated and you actually start seeing the results of that policy in action. Now that's a worry. During the time private sector actually has created, and there are multiple of those examples right within Larsen & Toubro where we have 7 defense specific factories, and a lot of them today wait for that work because from the policy to the implementation,
it's a long time.
That's time.
Mr. Rai, your thoughts on that?
Well, Mr. Patil has explained to you that the procedure in India takes long, somehow, which is right. And the capacity has to be built up before you can give an order. So therefore, Larsen & Toubro is very lucky. They got involved in a strategic project with a submarine, which they've done very well. So they had the capacity. Other companies have entered, Tatas have entered, because you must remember, defense business is capital intensive business. You're not very sure of your orders and you're not sure of your continuing orders. But the profit margin is very high and the technology that our Indian armed forces require is leading edge technology. So the challenge for the private industry has been very large. But as Mr. Patil explained, the day has come now. We wanted to run. Now, whether these words that our minister has put across will open competition fairly to the private sector is the test of time.
You brought out 2 points, entry and implementation. Entry for the private sector. If we split that aspect, that point of yours, what do you actually mean by where is the problem as far as the entry of the private sector taking advantage of the existing policy? Where is this?
The sector opened, as we all know, in 2001, and it was by, I would say, the Act of Parliament that the sector was opened. Licensing happened in 2002, which is exactly 10 years now. During these 10 years, we can see, except for, as Commodore Rai very rightly brought out, except for the strategic program, where is private sector in shipbuilding? Where is private sector on platforms when we talk of any kind of platform? Be it battle tanks, be it aircrafts, be it helicopters, be it shipbuilding. We are not there anywhere. The public sector undertaking in all these sectors have order book, which I don't need to say how many decades at today's output of whatever they deliver. So we obviously have an opening as by policy is enabled. It's an issue, as I said, in terms of when do we actually get to do that.
Perfectly all right. Now, I'll ask you, Mr. Rai, very clearly where the problem is on the private sector entry. My question to you is, do you think there is this phobia in the Ministry of Defense that DPSUs first, the others, whether it be Indian, foreign, XYZ, after DPSUs? Is that the mindset?
Well, that is the mindset, and changing India's mindset is the challenge, not before defense sector, it's before everybody. But let me put it very simply and very briefly. It is a chicken and egg story. The public sector undertakings have been going for a long time, and there is loyalty of the government because they have looked after India's defense for all these years. But today, with India on the rise, they alone cannot look after it. Mrs. Margaret Thatcher saw that. Of course, she went to the other extreme where she privatized everything. India should never do that. So the chicken and egg story comes up where the Ministry of Defense said, have you got the expertise? If you don't have the expertise, I can put a little money into my public sector undertaking and they will take the job.
So,
but unless you give them an order, they cannot get
effectively, they are constantly being asked to prove their expertise, and by the time they develop capability in 5 years, then they are asked for a new set of expertise, and this is the process that is going on. Is that...
You have put it very well. But the fact is that today, the Navy, the Army, the Air Force actually hold the hand of the public sector undertakings, especially the Navy, to produce something. If that hand is held, as it is held in the strategic project we have talked about, I see no problem. Big shipyards have come up. Tata is an industrial giant. Larsen Toubro is an industrial giant. Mahindra is an industrial giant. But we'll have to hold their hand, and we'll have to take the mindset, give them an order, and let's see what happens.
On that note, it's time for us to head into a break. When we come back, we will talk about the new guidelines for shipbuilding.
Whether you're an investor, a consumer, an entrepreneur, or just someone who wants to understand economic policy a little better.
I'm increasingly becoming a skeptic of Davos.
The government should actually issue inflation index bonds.
The governor had too many choices because liquidity was tight.
We need this budget to be making a real strong statement.
This is the show to watch.
Catch Policy Watch every Saturday 10 p.m. on Rajya Sabha television.
Welcome back. The Defence Procurement Procedure 2011 policy has laid down 2 sets of guidelines for domestic shipbuilding. It seeks to increase the competitive edge of both the private and public sector domestically.
The Defence Procurement Procedure DPP makes it clear that foreign direct investment FDI up to 26% can be made in specifically mentioned defence industries in the DPP 2008. There is a pending proposal of the Commerce Ministry supported by the Home and Finance Ministries to allow 49% FDI in the defence sector.
So in 10 years, we've only got about $3.5 million US in a period where I think the country has got almost $100 billion in FDI. All that has come into the defence sector is about $3.5 million. So clearly this cap of 26% isn't working, and it's not neither bringing in capital nor technology.
Besides changes in offset obligation, the Defence Procurement Procedure 2011 brings in new roles for private participation in the naval shipbuilding yard. It is sought to create a balance between private and public sector.
Naval shipbuilding now contains 2 sets of guidelines as compared to the single set of guidelines in Defence Procurement Procedure 2008. Section A includes provision that would be applicable exclusively for government-owned shipyards on nomination basis, while provisions in Section B are primarily meant for private shipyards. Even in this section, the state-owned shipyards will be eligible on a competitive basis. It includes a separate procedure for designing, construction and acquisition of ships for the armed forces.
The ability to use the private shipyard capability called modular shipbuilding is still not there. Private shipyards have now come with modular shipbuilding. So in short, the DPP has got a special section for naval warship building.
In offset provisions, the new DPP has expanded the list of eligible products and services which could be resorted to by the foreign companies for discharging their offset obligations. The earlier list of defence products has been expanded under the name List of Products Eligible for Discharge of Offset Obligations to include products of 2 more categories. Products for internal security and civil aerospace products. In all, the DPP 2011 has 27 categories of products in comparison to 13 categories in DPP 2008. Reshma Roy, Rajya Sabha TV.
How big a role does FDI play in the development of indigenous defence industry? Mr. Rai, first question to you is, FDI, there's been a constant demand from the private defense industry in India and also abroad, that FDI limit should be hiked. If that is not done, we will not get transfer of technology. Is that really true?
Absolutely true. We have been stuck at 26%, and there has been, as he said, a few $1 million FDI. Because when you come in with a foreign partner, with foreign direct investment, you actually form a company. Now, when you form a company, unless the foreign partner has got some say in the board, others will veto everything that he does. He knows how to make money because he came in with money. Therefore, there has been a study carried out, and that study has been absolutely clearly stated that unless you have 49% FDI, you are unlikely to succeed.
I'll bring in Mr. Patil. My question to you is, we'll come to the point of FDI versus the transfer of technology bit when your head of heavy engineering, whom we have interviewed, will tell us specifically where it affects, where it does not affect, because he's the leading voice as far as defense matters is concerned. But my question to you is, again, the same phobia, pro-DPSU phobia, is reflected in shipbuilding. So there is a special segment for, there are 3 segments, but DPSU shipbuilding, who according to the government has the competence, gets a complete clear-cut bias reflects in that. One. Second, do you think the private sector in shipbuilding has the bandwidth to match the DPSUs?
I'll address it one by one. The bias, to my mind, is for real, and it's, as I see, a structural anomaly. When you have a situation of Ministry of Defense always having a feeling of ownership for the PSUs, that 100% ownership, to my mind, is what we need to see as to how it reflects, and that's exactly what is visible right across last 10 years after opening up policy after policy. And this year, when it came in 2011, now it has a special segment. Now, the explanation from ministry on this is up to 70% of my capacity I would like to nominate. Beyond that, I would like to throw it open. Now, the issue is what is my capacity and who defines it and who validates it. So, I make a decision to validate, I make a decision to nominate, I make a decision to say what is my capacity. So, in the process,
I'll butt in. Raksha Ratna, that is one category where the Defense Ministry is actually going to open up the entire system and invite applications, 1,000 crores and above, company can come, apply, and if the bandwidth is there, then the 30% that you're talking of will go to it. Is that a way to simplify passing on the orders to to private sector as they're planning to do with DPSU?
RUR, as what we heard, as conceptualized, Raksha Udyog Ratnas by the Kelkar committee was genuinely a way forward. We have seen somewhere down the line, it is in the, let me use the word, some bureaucratic wrangle, it is not yet cleared. Now, in the process, even if there is a capacity and a capability, unless it can be thrown competitive, no decision can be made. Now, the competition is not now going to be between the DPSUs and RURs, because that automatically would mean only beyond 70% I would allow, and if genuinely a private sector had a capability and if there is only one who has that capability, the issue remains, how do I give it to him? If RUR was there, it would have been easy.
Your perspective on it, the way, the question that, the answer that he is given, where is the whole thing getting stuck?
You know, in India, we want to run, but suddenly we begin to walk. So the Kelkar committee, as Mr. Patil has rightly said, we were excited. Raksha Udyog Ratna. The companies will be on par with the PSUs. Industry will move. These giants will move. It's a lovely document. They were audited. What is your paid up capital? What is your revenue? What is your capacity? I could not qualify for RUR. It is the big giants who qualified. But then we never heard of it. It was never implemented. So first we tried to run and open this country in defense. Defense is a very serious subject. If you go to war and you do not have control of your strategic stuff, that is why I oppose 100% investment. That was the correct step. But we never moved. Now this DPP, may I say to you, which you are using this wonderful program, we have come to a stage where we need the private sector.
It's time for us to head into a break. When we come back, we will show you an interview with Mr. M.V. Kotwal, President, Heavy Engineering, L&T.
Hello and a very warm welcome to World's Panorama. Will he or won't he be able to do what he did back in 2008?
The president has run out of ideas. Now he's running out of excuses.
Catch all the updates from politics, business, entertainment and sports world. The show that gives you a 360-degree view of the events that shape your world. In this weekly half-hour special, at these times, only on Rajya Sabha TV.
Welcome back. To understand the whole issue better, I caught up with Mr. M.V. Kotwal, President, Heavy Engineering, L&T, a leading voice of the private defense industry. So on the defense procurement procedure, that as it exists and the way it has evolved 2011 onwards, what are the loose ends that still remain to be tightened?
There are a few things which need to be tied up when you talk about complex systems or platforms to build in the country. These cannot be treated in the same way as maybe the simpler things or commodities. Now the typical way things are done today is you talk to various bidders, you get the competitive bids in, and you look at finally only one parameter, that who is the lowest in price.
Right. L1.
Whereas, yeah, L1. Now for this kind of system, I think it is very, very important for the entire system to get changed to incorporate in that what we call an L1 T1. Which means
technical one.
Yeah, the technical, which can really include not only technical capability, project management skills, what is the track record, should all be put in a kind of a weightage system.
Right.
Now, once that weightage system, and this should be decided much before the bids are opened.
Right.
So there's nothing like any tweaking afterwards.
Yeah.
Having done that in a transparent way, now what happens is the people who get an order finally are people who are, of course, reasonably priced, but more important, as a total, the project will come up in time.
But the transfer of technology, there seems to be an issue with the foreign technology holder.
One good thing is, for example, this Make India category, like we can select some chosen niche technologies which maybe it's not worth developing all of them again from the beginning in India, so you get some niche players and get it. But since we are taking a full responsibility for the full system, we cannot then hide under the fact, oh, we have got this, we didn't get the thing properly. So it's a single point responsibility. So that's what I would like to say.
Bandwidth, L&T over the years has really evolved, and there it, as of now, it holds relatively, basic technology, definitely for the army.
Now, when you come to buying, now buying gets into a category of a procurement process. In the procurement process, most of these big programs used to be nominated in two ways. Either it goes to the DPSUs or ordnance factories as one route. The other, if it's a development system, it has to go through DRDO.
Yeah.
These are only two routes available. So now, only through the orders we got from DRDO could we develop this technology.
Okay.
Now that we have, for example, I'll give you, if an order is placed on a foreign company with a base that this is available to the DPSUs, they may require technology which we may not need at all.
Right.
Now, what happens in the process, since we are not party to that whole decision-making process, how much of technology is really needed in India?
Yeah.
That if the broader view is taken, then you will find that, okay, we don't have to pay so much money for that technology. We only take the bits and pieces which are gaps, and that's it.
Do you think that is one of the reasons which is preventing transfer of technology from happening?
Okay. I think it's a very important question. Looking at it very externally, without knowing exactly what defense technology is all about, it looks very simplistic to say, higher the level of FDI, higher the level of technology.
Yeah.
It looks like that, it looks quite reasonable. Many people talk about it. In reality, we who have dealt with this kind of thing over decades, who have dealt with these technology players, we also know how closely they guard their technology. Okay? Now, it is not FDI which will get you that route.
Okay.
It is a determined effort from the buyer, which is the government. We are the biggest buyers, importers of defense equipment, which is not a thing to be very proud of, but that is the fact. We hold the keys. So when we design any RFP or whatever it is, Rather than going into a vague thing that we will do it through offset values and this and that, you say this is exactly what we want.
L1 and T1. So Mr. Kotwal is in favor of the changing the existing parameter, which is a single parameter, which is just L1, which is the lowest bid. He according to him, a technical one, which is the technical best company parameter should also be added. I'll bring in Mr. Rai. Do you think that's a valid proposal?
Actually, it has come into the DPP. Life cycle costing, few other parameters will be taken into account before anything else. And I know of Larsen Toubro having lost a particular contract on another technical issue, though they were L1. Larsen and Toubro for 20 fast patrol boats was L1, however they lost. So that is still to settle down. But I like the answer that Mr. Kotwal gave. We hold the keys. So we must know how to get that technology. And if you get to 49% and you get modular, now Mazagon Dock is looking at Fincantari. But we are going and buying 6 minesweepers from Gangnam, South Korea. And that technology is going to be 2 built in South Korea, Gangnam, mine hunters, and 4 to be built in Goa shipyard. Actually, it should have been open for any private sector because it is a greenfield yard. We've got a big Katopalli yard in there. We've got Pipavav, Bharti. But however, it is being generated and of course it was nominated.
Identification of technology is a very big issue on an institutional basis. So which essentially means the MOD has a problem and doesn't actually know or cannot put its finger on what technology it really requires. Do you think that's a valid?
It is valid. At the same time, people who actually make are the ones who genuinely can define what he needs. Today, what Mr. Kotwal said is we are not someone who is even heard. We don't have a voice in the decision making. We are invited today as one single industry voice. Before decision making is done, you're heard, you're out, and then the gentlemen sit and make decision.
I get it. So that's all we have time for. Thank you, sir, for joining us on this discussion. It's time for us to end the show. You can email your suggestions and comments to law.rstv@gmail.com. You can also watch our shows on the YouTube. We'll be back with a new issue and a new episode. Keep watching Rajya Sabha TV.